So what it taught us is have as little leverage as possible.
Yep.
It taught me that vacant land is an ice cube melting in the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to buy that unless you have an immediate action plan.
Right.
And lastly, don't believe your own bullshit.
David Lombardi, thank you so much for being here, brother. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you.
I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
As you know.
Yeah, we've known each other over the years and in different capacities. And, my previous company, Live Ninja, you are our landlord in Wynwood.
Yep.
Great building, great space.
We have a vacancy.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
For
yeah.
those watching.
That's right. Absolutely. And I'll leave the information in the description if you want to hit up David. He's got some really cool properties in Wynwood that are worth checking out. I want to get into Wynwood for sure. That's there's a lot of great stuff to talk about that area, because that area is just incredible and it's exploding. But I think first, just for our listeners, would love to let them learn about you and your backstory and how you got into the space.
I was born in New York. I grew up with a single mom. My father died when I was 2. I'm an only child. And my mother was a secretary her whole life, including the last 17 years of her life in my office. And we moved to Miami Beach when I was 7. And I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment. And my mother always taught me, you've got to work hard. You've got to be successful and make a lot of money so you can take care of me when I'm old. That was the mantra.
Yep.
And I was introduced to real estate at a young age when I was about 16, 17 by a friend of mine's father. Having not grown up with a father, I gravitated to my friends' dads, and Norman DeVect used to take us looking at apartment buildings because he was buying apartment buildings at the time. And I learned an awful lot about what to look for when you walk properties, how to analyze rent rolls and expenses, etc. And at the time, I was a hard-working room service waiter at the Alexander Hotel, and I was making a lot of money a week. And
I actually lived in the Alexander Hotel.
Really?
Yeah, I did. After my mom sold her house in Miami Beach, we went to the Diamond for a little bit, and then the Alexander was doing the hotel stuff, and then they also started selling it as condos as well. And
exactly.
We lived there for a while. It was nice.
Yeah, I was the second room service waiter hired by Steve Muss when he changed it over from apartments to hotel in honor of his father, the Alexander Muss. And that must have been around 1982 or 3.
Wow.
And I was making $700-800 a week living at home. It was a great job. I was able to save a lot of money. And by 20, I had saved up enough to put down on an apartment building, and my friend Scott's dad, Norman, he matched me, and we bought a building in Normandy Isle on Calais Drive, where I really got the bug. I learned how to do linoleum floors, painting, some minor cabinetry work, hanging doors, exterior and interior painting. And that was kind of my introduction to real estate.
Awesome. So you moved into Miami, you said, when you were 7?
Yes.
What year was that?
73.
Oh, wow. So you've seen Miami really change as
absolutely.
a city, right?
Yes.
When you came here, what was Miami as far as, I feel
Heaven's waiting room. South Beach was Heaven's waiting room.
Right.
I went to Hebrew Academy. I went to Beach High.
Yep.
And South Beach, then all the buildings were beige or brown. And you had all the old retirees on the porches waiting to go. And then in about 83, 84, Leonard Horowitz, he started painting buildings pastels. I remember the Carlisle Grill was the first thing of interest that opened on Ocean Drive. And they had a piano player in the lobby, and they had polished the terrazzo, painted the building in pastel colors. And I remember calling my uncles in New York saying, you got to come down here. We got to buy a building. This place is going to change dramatically. And of course, New York Jewish uncles, it's shit. It was always shit.
What are you thinking?
It'll always be shit.
It's terrible.
And I was about 17 at the time. And by the time I was 25, I was worth more than they were, because I figured out a way to buy a building and then parlay that, and then I opened a restaurant on Arthur Godfrey Road called the 41st Street Eatery. Right when I got married with my wife, Shari, I was 22, because at 20, she told me she wasn't waiting around forever. So we got engaged shortly after, married at 22, and we lived in a 3-story walk-up above the restaurant.
Okay.
And I put my life savings into the restaurant to build it. And we had it for 4 years. And in those 4 years, we had 2 sons. And in the 4th year, my wife said to me one night when I came home, she goes, "If you don't sell that restaurant, I'm leaving you." I said, "Why?" She goes, "Because you're a maniac, and I won't raise the boys in front of a maniac." It's very stressful.
The restaurant business is tough, yeah.
Very stressful.
If we're looking at Arthur Godfrey Road, 41st Street, which building is that right now?
Well, it's a couple of doors east of Cafe Avanti, 726 Arthur Godfrey. It's a 3-story building, very narrow. Only has 1 store on the bottom. And we were directly next door at that time to Pantry Pride.
Pantry Pride, right? I remember that.
CVS.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So right across from North Beach Elementary, where my wife was a school teacher for many years.
Yep.
And that was it. And we put the restaurant for sale. And I had to think of what I was going to do next. And I remembered my real estate experience being positive. I loved architecture and houses. And the trick was I wanted to go into something that would only take me to make it work. Because in the restaurant, I had 11 employees. You grow to hate them.
Right.
They don't care.
Yep.
And I wanted to go into something only would take me to make it work. It had to have low startup cost, low overhead, but most important, unlimited potential. And I knew all the realtors in town because I used to feed them. So I decided to interview 5 or 6 of them. And I asked them all the same questions so that I would have realistic expectations going into this new career.
Yep.
And I asked them, what did you make your first year? What did you make your second and third years? And how long did it take you to get to the top? And I asked them other things like how to get started, best practices, etc. And all of their answers were similar, so I had kind of a roadmap to go by. But the thing that I did differently than them was my first year I made $30,000. My second year I made $60,000. But I emptied our bank account, took 30 of that, and plunked it down on a building on 6th and Euclid.
Okay, we're in South Beach.
Yeah, 556 Euclid, a 6-unit building. Third year I made $100,000. I took $50,000 and put it down on another building.
Just kept doubling down.
930 10th Street. My success is attributed to throwing myself into things where I had to make them work, where there was no option of failure. And, I'm not particularly handy, but I would do demo of kitchens. I would rip up floors.
Personally, demoing, yeah.
I was doing everything, because when you don't have any money other than what you just took out of the bank.
Yep.
And my wife, Shari, would say to me, "Are you sure? You sure this is the right thing?" And I said, "Shari, this is the only way I know to build wealth for us in the future." Most realtors spend all day convincing others to buy real estate, and they themselves buy none. And it's crazy because they see their clients making money, building wealth, and for whatever reason, they hesitate. They don't have the confidence.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's true. A lot of real estate people, they just want to convince other people to buy, and they don't spend time looking for themselves. Right?
Exactly.
That's a great point. So this was all in your early 20s, right?
When I sold the restaurant, I was 26, started the realty.
Yep.
So I had 7 buildings accumulated on South Beach by the time I was 34.
Wow.
And then at 34, on a rainy Saturday, this leads into Wynwood.
Please. Yeah, let's talk about that.
So I got a call from a friend of mine, Dennis Peters, very astute guy, a real street guy, great sense of real estate sense. Called me up on a Saturday. It was raining. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He goes, "Take a ride with me. I'll pick you up." He takes me over the bridge and west of North Miami Avenue. Now, 27 years I'm living in Miami Beach. I had never been west of North Miami Avenue at that point of my life.
Yep.
And I'm like, where are we going? He goes, I'm going to look at a warehouse for sale. I said, oh, okay. So we go to this warehouse, 150 Northwest 24th Street. Today, it's Racket. A fancy bar. Very nice bar. And we go into this warehouse, and there's an elderly man in there repairing boilers. And there's metal everywhere and grease everywhere. And he's in coveralls, and he's filthy. And Dennis speaks to him for a minute and then comes over to me and he says, what do you think? Now I look around. There's 24-foot high ceilings with skylights. I like that. I said, but honestly, Dennis, I don't know what to think. What do you think? He goes, I think it's too cheap and I'm going to buy it. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it's 5,000 square feet. What would it cost to build a building? I knew that answer. I said, $65 a square foot. He goes, okay, that's $325,000 with no land cost. I can buy the building for $130,000. He goes, I'll figure out what to do with it later. Mm-hmm. I was puzzled. I went home. I thought about what he said, and I jumped in the car on Monday by myself, and I went back to that neighborhood. And I was serpentining the streets. And at that time, every second or third building, had a for rent or for sale sign. Most of the light industrial manufacturing at that point in the year 2000 had gone overseas to China. Mm-hmm. And the neighborhood was kind of dormant. But I came to a few quick conclusions. I liked the scale of the neighborhood. I liked the height of the buildings to the width of the streets. And I liked that I could get there from my house on Miami Beach in 7 minutes. And I liked that you could get on and off the highway in a minute.
Yeah, right on the highway.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was also 2 minutes to the Miami Design District. Mm-hmm. And it was 5 minutes to downtown. So I came to a few quick conclusions. Because I knew the retailers in those three areas, Miami Beach, Design District, and downtown, their rents were rising. Right. I thought it might be advantageous to have a large concentration of cheap warehouse space in close proximity to those three retail areas, because as their rents rose, no longer could they afford to store their excess inventories in the back of their stores. They would need all the floor space for sales. And I wanted to be that low-cost provider of storage. So on a leap of faith, I contracted to buy two buildings, 2620 and 2632 North Miami Avenue, for $400,000, 10,000 square feet, which equated to $40 a foot. And as a guy newly coming into the neighborhood, North Miami Avenue seemed to be the best street. Never did I dream Northwest 2nd, right? At that time.
Right.
So within 3 weeks of buying these two buildings, walking the design district, introducing myself to every retailer, I had both sides rented.
Amazing.
Covering my nut. So I knew I was onto something.
You were really going door to door.
Door to door.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I put $100,000 down with my two partners. We financed $300,000. And I remember bringing the banker from Gibraltar Bank, Kathy Asen, over there. She had financed 5 apartment buildings for us on South Beach. I'm standing on Miami Avenue with her in 2001, and she says to me, why on earth do you want to buy these? And I said, Kathy, you got to trust me. This ain't going to stay down like this for long. It's too well situated. So, funny enough, as a segue, I'll tell you that 3 years to the day that we closed on those buildings in January of 2001, we sold them for $1,280,000 in January of 2004. So the $100,000 became $900,000. And now I really went hog wild. But going backwards again, after I rented those two spaces, I contracted to buy 3 more on the corner of Northwest 2nd and 25th. And had those rented before we even closed on.
It's like the same strategy you were employing back in those South Beach early days, right?
Yes.
You just keep, buying and doubling down.
Exactly. And by 2005, I had sold everything on South Beach and put all that money into Wynwood. Thank God.
Yeah.
That was a good move. Better lucky than smart
Yep.
is my motto.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And Wynwood, just in general, how long did you see it until it really started to accelerate? So this is 2001, and you're starting to accumulate property.
Right.
A lot of people look at Wynwood like, oh, this happened overnight. Didn't really happen overnight. Took some time, right, to build it out, and there was a lot of strategic moves that got that neighborhood invigorated. So can you talk about that timeline and what those things happened? Yeah.
There's so many milestones. You know, after buying the 5 buildings, I started to realize there was art happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading the New Times, and there was an article called Welcome to the Edge about a young guy named Brooke Dorsch who was living in a gallery in the rear of this warehouse and a gallery in the front, right on 24th Street, across the street from my friend's Dennis's building. And it said he was having an opening that Saturday. So I went with my wife. Now, I'm going, this must be about March 2001. We get there at 7:30 in the evening. It's pitch black. The street lights don't work. There's junk cars lining the street because there were body shops. There were mean dogs behind fences. And we had to park on the corner of 2nd and walk in. And it wasn't inviting. We get to this red door. We walk in the red door, and all of a sudden, we're in another world. Crisp white walls, great lighting, beautiful artwork adorning the walls, and about 35 young people drinking wine and beer and discussing the artwork. And it went off like a light bulb for me. This is what we could be doing with these spaces. So I got to know Brooke that night. We bought some art. That was my intro to buying art. And he explained to me a few days later, we got together, that there were literally dozens of artists working in spaces throughout the neighborhood. But you didn't know it then because anywhere there had been a window in those buildings had been blocked up. Anywhere there was a fence had barbed wire. It was telling the public to fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
You're not welcome here. It was not very inviting.
Right.
Because they had been through riots and things in the 90s, so that kind of evolved to that level. And he took me to meet artists and go in their studios. And then I started doing something when I had a vacancy. I created a program called Roving Fridays in Wynwood, where if I had a vacant space, I got 20 artists together, because what artists have, they don't have money, but they have inventory.
Right.
And they would come and hang a show. And I had a curator named Dustin Orlando. He had a gallery on 5th Avenue at that time called Objects Art Space. He later became my tenant on 36th Street. And then we'd get the yummiest to do a fashion show. We'd have a live painting demonstration going. And I would pay for a DJ La Spam and the All-Stars, and a band, the Swanelo sound system.
Do you know DJ Spam? Yeah.
So I was one of the early guys to use them for entertainment around. And Bacardi, I got them to sponsor the liquor, which was amazing because they not only sponsored giving us liquor, they gave us cups, stirrers, napkins, and bartenders.
Nice.
All I had to do was pay for ice.
Amazing.
And after the first one of these Roving Fridays, we had about 150 people. 3 months later, we did another one. We had 350. The third one, we had 800.
Wow.
It was wild. It became a real happening because what I was trying to do was get people to see the same vision I had, what this neighborhood could become. And perhaps they would take an interest and buy a building or move their business there, etc. So
amazing.
That was in 2001, 2, 3, 4. We did maybe a dozen of those events, and they kept growing and getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, from 2 galleries in the beginning, which was Dorsch and Locust Projects, it grew to, maybe 30 by 2004.
Wow. And was this at the same time also? Was there graffiti everywhere like there was
No,
today?
not at all.
Okay. Because for our listeners that don't know, Wynwood is embraced as this like walking outdoor art gallery that welcomes graffiti artists to paint murals on walls. How did that happen? How did that transition happen into that?
Well, I'll just reverse for 1 second. And Art Basel coming to Miami was very important, obviously.
And what year was that?
Well, it was supposed to come in 2001, but September 11th happened.
Right.
So the international art insurers got extremely nervous and said, we're not shipping billions of dollars of art to America right now. So they waited a year and did it in December of 2002. By December of 2004, by the third rendition, Wynwood became this dirty little secret over the causeway. The real cognoscenti, the curators from around the world, the museum directors, they were coming over to visit with Rubel and Margulies, and they were visiting the galleries. And by 2005, I think it was, I got a visit from two artists who had participated in my Roving Fridays for years, Books and Typo. And they had created a collective called Primary Flight. And they were a conduit to all of the muralists all over the world. And I remember them telling me, listen, we got some artists coming in for Basel this year. We'd like to paint some murals. Can you give us some walls? And the first wall I gave was the front of my office to the London Police, Chaz and Bob. And they came in, did an amazing mural. And then what happened was, this might have been 2006. And then a year or so later, Tony Goldman started his Wynwood Wall project with Jeffrey Deitch. And he took it to a different level.
That was 2006.
Yeah. I think he did his in 2007.
Got it.
He started. And then it grew in 2008, and Joey's opened in 2008.
Right.
And Joey's was a monumental occurrence for Wynwood.
It was the first restaurant in Wynwood, right?
Yes. And it was really done against Tony Goldman's wishes. Joey and his wife then, Thea, decided to take their own money and spend $700,000 building this restaurant on that corner. And it became the instant de facto chamber of commerce for the neighborhood, where all of us business owners could see each other and gather. And it became a real place of pride for all of us. And they did it at a very nice level. It had marble tabletops, polished concrete floors. It has a Bezzazza tile mural on the wall. It really established a bar by which future businesses should try to attain when they come in, i.e. Morgan's Restaurant, a tenant of mine. She did a beautiful job when she opened shortly thereafter, and on and on.
Now it's about 2006, 2007, and things are really starting to kind of take shape as far as like what the identity of the neighborhood is going to be, right?
Well, also, you see, the Roving Fridays in Wynwood and the success of conversion of the Seminole building where your loft is, I did that in 2001. And the response to those lofts were off the charts. So I knew I was onto something, because my whole concept back then for live work lofts in the neighborhood, I had a lot of tenants from South Beach paying me $700-800 a month for a studio, who were also working in Wynwood if they were a graphic designer, a web designer, a photographer, or an artist.
Right.
And they were paying the same $700-800 for a workspace. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if they could combine both expenses into one inspiring space?
For sure.
And that's when I did that conversion of that building. The phone calls were off the charts, but not everybody could spend the $1,500-1,600. I had hundreds of calls for $1,000 a month. So I knew there was this unmet demand, which led me to think about actually building a new building from scratch, where the artists and creatives could take an ownership stake in the neighborhood and sell it as a condo. And we started marketing this dream project on some land we bought at these Roving Fridays. And we would hand out these flyers, and then inevitably the following week, 4, 5, 6 people would fall into my office and say, hey, I got this flyer. Could you tell me about the project? And I said, well, it's going to have 12-foot ceilings like this office. It's going to have big windows, 8 foot tall, 7 feet wide. bare concrete floors like this office, exposed electric conduit like on the wall here, and a stainless steel kitchen. And people would write a check. And it was amazing. And the design was for 36 units, and we ended up selling a majority enough to get financing. But first, every bank in town turned me down twice because I was a virgin developer looking to build in a downtrodden, unproven area a product for a demographic of people who had no money. So it's a very hard story to tell.
For sure, absolutely. This is your first big commercial development.
Yeah, this was my first ever idea to build something from the ground. This was around late 03. We didn't end up getting financing until late 04. And then we broke ground and built it. And when the building was about 75% finished, I got a fascinating phone call. And this is like March, April 05. I get a fascinating phone call from a guy with a German accent from overseas. He tells me his name, Andreas Gertis, and he was calling me from the island of Malta. And he saw this utilitarian rendering of a building we were constructing in the Wynwood area, and it appeals to him. And he wanted to know how many units I had left, and I had about 6 left. And he says, well, are any of them contiguous? And I said, well, on the top floor, there's 3 contiguous, and then 1 across the hall. What are the prices? I tell him. He says, well, I have an attorney there, and he's got more than enough of my money in his escrow account to cover those 4 units. I would like to buy them. And I said, really, who's your attorney? And he tells me the name, Jonathan Beloff, who I happen to have known very well because of my brokerage capacities. So I hang up with him. I called Jonathan Beloff, and I said, Jonathan, do you know a guy named Andreas Gertis? He goes, of course. Why? So he just called me. He says he wants to buy 4 of my units. He goes, he told you that? I said, yeah. He goes, congratulations, David. I said, who is this guy? He goes, oh, he's credited with bringing cell phone technology to Europe. Wow. He's worth God knows how much, and he collects Rolls Royces and Porsches. And if he said he wants your units, just send me the contracts, and you're in.
Amazing.
So the most interesting kinds of people believed in the area early on when there was nothing. There was no Joey's back then. You know, there was no Panther Coffee.
Right. This Joey's was, what, 06 you said?
08.
08.
Yeah, December of 08 he opened. And Panther came after that. Right. So in 05, I was building a building where people were going to live like Batman. They would pull into a garage secured on the ground floor and go up to their lair.
Yeah.
I never dreamt of lining it with retail. There was nobody walking.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's changed quite a bit. The types of businesses that are now moving into the neighborhood.
Fabulous.
Panther Coffee was an interesting, I think, catalyst for all this, right? Because in Miami, you had lots of Starbucks and things like that. But I think when, especially folks like me, you always go to the West Coast and to Seattle and things like that, and you see all these like craft hipster coffee shops. And then finally Miami had one of its own.
Yes.
And that brought its own traffic and awareness into Wynwood. People wanted to come and see this new coffee shop that all the papers were raving about. And for me personally, I got so excited about this neighborhood. I graduated from Florida State in 2007, so I came back here around that time. I was looking for a bachelor pad. I'm a single guy moving back home, and I want a nice apartment. And at the time, I had a 90-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback. I had a huge dog. So I was looking for a nice apartment that would also take this big dog. And 2 Midtown was just recently developed, in North Miami Avenue. And I said, okay, looks like a nice apartment. There's no dog weight restrictions, which was like a big rarity back in the time. And I said, okay, I'll move here. My mom freaked out at me. She's like, wait a second, you're going to that side of the town? My mom's old school is really Miami Beach.
Sure.
Miami Beach all the way.
Right.
She had no idea what was happening there. So again, I was kind of, I forced my hand just because I had the dog, lived in Midtown. And then just in general, first, and by the way, it was a ghost town. I think I was the second or third tenant, in the building. So I just started exploring Wynwood, and for me, as someone that was born and raised in Miami Beach, always looking for something cultural like this.
Yes.
You know, Miami never had something like this, where it was just like the awakening of like the arts and technology and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So for me, as soon as I saw this happening and Panther Coffee became, like you were talking about Joey's being a hub.
Yes.
Panther Coffee became a hub of its own in a sense, right?
No question. And then, you know, Panther Coffee, Zach the Baker,
right?
Pink Pie,
yep.
These places, Morgan's,
yep.
These are iconic places that make Wynwood relevant,
sure,
all the way until today.
Yep.
The moment we start to sell out to the big national companies, we lose relevance,
right?
And we lose the mojo,
right?
And we, you know, my holdings, in particular, I try to not have any of those tendencies, which brings another set of challenges, of course, because everyone's undercapitalized. Yes. They're young. We have to nurture them along. But I find that that's probably my next phase for me, is to bring awareness of these unique curated tendencies that we try to show there and get them to be successful.
Yeah. How do we help that, as far as like allowing for these unique brands that aren't quite established, but that make up the identity of Wynwood? How do we allow that to be sustainable in the long run?
I think it's very important that everybody in Miami who enjoys going to Wynwood thinks of Wynwood when they want to buy something. It's very important. Don't drive to Aventura Mall.
Right.
You know, unless there's a tenant there that we don't have, but with a product we don't have.
Right.
But I think we have to do a better job of getting the Miami market to know exactly what we do offer in Wynwood. I mean, the tendencies. Have you been to the Levi's pop-up?
No.
Levi jeans, such a feather in our cap of Wynwood. 27th and Northwest 2nd Avenue, they took an acre lot and made a Shangri-La fantasy experiential boutique for their jeans out of shipping containers.
Wow.
With a Zen garden, a nail salon, a bar. They have people who emboss the jean jackets or jeans for you. You pick different things you want, and they have people on sewing machines applying them. It's one of the greatest experiences that has hit Wynwood in 18 years that I've been there.
Yeah, so the not just the Levi's one, but there was also a Jack Daniel's pop-up experience that I went to.
Do you remember that during Art Basel? That was during Art Basel a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But it's constantly evolving, constantly changing.
Yep.
But it's terrific. And I'm very optimistic about the way it's going.
Yep.
We have some great tenants. We have 8 Space, which is for young women, fashion, sportswear, activewear, and swimwear.
Yep.
And we have another young guy who came to me, Mike Massa. He owns Canopy, which is kind of urban wear, mainly for men, and some great sneakers. He's got all these collectible sneakers. We have Petusa on the corner of Northwest 2nd. This is a young woman who started a brand of her own. Everything's made in Peru. And she had a big online presence, never had a brick and mortar store, wanted to do one, came to us and did it. We have these young Venezuelan kids, all guys who opened Morelia Paletas. You go in there, it's like a rainbow of colors of the paletas.
I take my kids there. They love it.
It's very artistic.
They love it,
The colors, the dippings, the toppings. It's experiential.
Yes, for sure. That's one thing I could say about Wynwood. It's just an experience. It's all the senses.
Right.
Wynwood, right? It kind of just ignites you. Exactly. It really is an amazing place. And I think also what definitely helped, because like Wynwood is now, I think, like the top tourist destination for Miami. You know, it's kind of eclipsed, in my opinion, it's eclipsed South Beach. People wanted to get off the plane and go to South Beach. Now they come to Wynwood.
Yes.
I think the rise of social media at the same time has helped a lot. You know,
beyond belief.
Beyond, right? Because
we never saw it coming.
Yeah, Facebook was a thing that was emerging in 2006, 2007. Right. And then shortly after that, 3-4 years later, you had Instagram.
Right.
And that just, the combination of the vibrancy of Wynwood.
The murals.
Yeah, the murals.
They come, they do selfies, they post it all over the world.
Yep.
And it became known.
So how do you think about the like other neighborhoods that you're identifying has similar opportunities to Wynwood? I think a lot of people are talking about Allapattah these days, right?
Yes.
It's like a natural one.
Well,
how do you identify these next up and coming neighborhoods?
Well, it's number one, people ask me all the time, what's the next Wynwood?
Yep.
I don't know that there will be a next Wynwood. Wynwood had a lot of magic and things concurrently happening that made it such.
It's like a perfect storm.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'd say that Miami in general is the city of the future in this country. There's so much potential. The whole world is interested in Miami. We're a tax-free state, so we're getting all these people from New England, New York, New Jersey, moving down, L.A., moving here to avoid, taxes, state taxes.
Yep.
We have, of course, South America. We're the capital of South America.
Yep.
So I'm very bullish on Miami in general, and the more people that come here looking to plant their flag and make this their hometown, the more these other peripheral neighborhoods will advance and improve. The Rubels moving to Allapattah, hometown barbecue with Robert Winnett. He's a monumental developer. He's a guy who can implement huge change. Those kind of people landing in that area bode well for Allapattah. My office, we've been brokering Allapattah for the last 4 years. We've probably sold 100 properties in Allapattah in those 4 years. Jonathan Eisman in my office.
Nice.
Killing it. Yeah.
Nice. So Allapattah's one. Also, people are bullish on Little Haiti in different respects, right?
We're invested in Little River up on 83rd and Northeast 2nd. We have some gallery tenants there across from the Citadel. I feel very good about that portion of the area for sure.
So it's not just about one neighborhood. It's just like Miami in general. There's a ton of opportunity right, that you see just sprawled out all over the place.
No question.
Awesome. Want to shift a little bit and not just about specifics in real estate, but I mean, this can be from real estate, but to talk about some of the biggest lessons we've learned, as business owners and as entrepreneurs.
Yes.
I like to start also, successes teach us a lot, no doubt, but sometimes it's the failures and the mistakes we make along the way that teach us the most. And that actually leads to our successes moving forward, or those failures. You got to kind of fail to succeed. What sticks out in your mind as some of the biggest failures, but some of the biggest lessons you've learned from those failures?
Well, I think there was a point after being successful building Wynwood Lofts. I had never built anything, and we built that thing, sold it out, made a $2 million net profit. And I thought I was hot shit. And I had a larger assemblage of warehouses diagonally across the street called Pompeii Outdoor Furniture Company, their property. We designed a project that was going to be 3 times the size. This is now like 06, called Pompeii. It was going to be 10, 12 stories. It was going to be 3 towers, and we started taking deposits. We spent almost $500,000 on architecturals, and then by 07, I started to get very nervous about where the market was going, and we decided to pan it. We gave back the deposits, and we took our lumps. Also, around that time, we had bought 3 acres of land behind Wynwood Lofts, and we were highly leveraged, and that almost took us down completely by 2010. And fortunately, we had seller financing, and the seller met with us and agreed to take a haircut, and everybody worked together, and we survived it. But in 2010, we could have lost everything because we were cross-collateralized.
Right.
So what it taught us is have as little leverage as possible. It taught me that vacant land is an ice cube melting in the sun. Don't want to buy that unless you have an immediate action plan.
Right.
And lastly, don't believe your own bullshit.
Right.
And that plays into today as well, because Wynwood right now, although it's a darling and you see $1 billion of construction happening, the user experience, the visitor experience is suffering from what it was 3-4 years ago, because there are entire block fronts that are dormant. So it makes it harder for the little guy and gal retailer and entrepreneur to make it.
Right.
And we lost 3 tenants over the summer, and we work with the tenants to try to keep them afloat. And I think all of that's very important.
For sure.
That you have to have your finger on the pulse to understand where your tenants, my tenants are my customers.
Right.
They have their own customers, but they are my customers.
Absolutely.
And if they don't succeed, I don't succeed.
Yeah.
And a rising tide lifts all ships.
For sure. For sure. And I love the point you make about not believing your old bullshit, because
very important.
We do that all the time, right? I mean, we're easily convinced by our own theories and thoughts.
And I have a wife at home to tell me I'm no genius all the time.
That always helps. That always helps. All right, awesome. So we talked a lot about, what failures taught you and some of the lessons you learned there, but what are also some of the lessons you've learned when it comes to developing real estate and just in your experience in general? Like, what are some of those top lessons?
Sure. Developing real estate, it has a myriad of issues, and I had to learn them sometimes the hard way. Mm-hmm. You have to ask a lot of questions, and it's always good to have an expert at your side. So I usually hire an owner's rep who has tremendous experience, and I ask a lot of questions, and I have my sons sitting by our sides so they could soak it all up as well, because they're now basically taking over my company. Sure.
It's important to know what you don't know, so to speak, right? Like
100%, and don't be afraid to pay for it, because that investment could save you a lot more on the other side.
For sure.
The other thing I thought for a life lesson, I'm amazed in this country today, there's no education to young people for fiscal responsibility.
So true.
I learned at a very early age, don't ever buy anything you can't afford to pay for today. So thus, I've never had credit card debt. I went without a lot of things, but I only bought them when I could afford them. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more gratifying that way as well.
Sure.
But this is not taught in the schools today, and I think it's a real shame.
You're right. Fiscal responsibility and just being smart with your finances. It's it's a skill that slowly going away.
Crucial.
Yeah, I see a lot of startups, for example. They're raising $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, and they're not even doing their expenses. They're not putting it into QuickBooks. They don't have a CFO. They
don't care. Money's not money.
Exactly.
Only their money's money. Your money ain't money.
Right.
And in colleges, what a disgrace to talk these kids into student debt. Mm-hmm. Student loan debt. Think about how ironic that is.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, I see a lot of my friends going into debt, and a lot of them have graduated from college and don't use the degree that they went into debt for in the first place. Right. The system is inherently broken.
And they can't pay it down.
Yep.
There's no job paying them enough to pay it down and support themselves.
Right.
They'll never own a house. This is all craziness.
It is crazy. And the internet has also democratized a lot of the access to education. A lot of people are learning the same kind of stuff online.
Yes.
Brian was part of a video editing class, and he went to the class. He paid for it as part of his college education, and the teacher basically said, "Go on YouTube and learn how to figure it out." So it's just it's an evolving world, and education is changing so quickly. One other thing I wanted to ask you, real estate, I mean, we're in Miami and everybody's a realtor in Miami, right? There's just so many people.
It's like having a belly button.
Exactly. Everybody's a real estate agent. Everybody's a realtor and selling and buying property. What advice would you give for people trying to break into the space, people trying to succeed in real estate when it's such a crowded and competitive market?
Yes. I would say that for every personality, there are clients. And also, dig one hole. If you want to sell residential, pick a neighborhood, pick a condo building, become the perceived expert over time of that market. You'll know you've achieved that when you're in the grocery store and somebody stops you and says, "Hey, what's my condo worth? Hey, what's my house worth?" But it just takes a lot of fortitude and stick-to-itiveness, and you can't let being denied or being when somebody turns you down, you can't let that bother you.
Right.
Water off a duck's back.
Right, exactly. And I think what you alluded to earlier, patience is key. This is the in-demand Uber Eats, car shows up at my door generation. Everything's instant access. To build a reputation in real estate
takes years.
Right.
Years.
Right. So
you got to love it.
Right. You got to love it. You got to love it. You got to love serving people and helping clients, right? So that's a big part of it.
And making deals and showing property. And, some people love the architecture. Other people love negotiating.
Right.
It's got something for everyone.
So you got to carve your niche, like go focus on something instead of being a mile wide and an inch deep and just being everywhere, right?
Yes.
Good stuff. Awesome, David. Well, this was an awesome episode. A lot of value. I learned a ton.
Cool.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
We really appreciate it. We're going to leave all of David's information in the description so people could check out Lombardi Properties and learn more. You got lots of awesome inventory currently in Wynwood, right?
Yes.
Lots of availability.
Right.
So can they just check that out at your website?
Yeah, on LoopNet or our website. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
You can check it out.
Okay, good. Well, David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Will.